Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show you how to visualize or graph an independent samples t-test. And just as a reminder, an independent samples t-test is when you're comparing an outcome or dependent variable between two mutually exclusive or non-overlapping groups. And so that could be different subgroups of students within a school. That could be students in one state versus students in another state. And so I say non-overlapping or mutually exclusive because you can't have a school that's in two states, or you can't have a student who is in two school districts, for instance. So you would have to have everybody, a student can only be in one school in your data, a school can only be in one county or one state, for instance. That's what we mean by non-overlapping or mutually exclusive. And so let's say that what we're interested in doing is looking at SAT participation between high and low poverty schools. And so what I've done separately, and you can see in the video on how to run an independent samples t-test how I did all of this. So I've this data set. So this is every school in the state of public school in the state of New Jersey in the 2018-19 school year. So the data set doesn't contain a variable that says high poverty or low poverty. So that is the researcher. I had to come up with a definition. And so what I decided on, just for the sake of illustration, is that a school where fewer than 30% of its students are identified as economically disadvantaged, that's a low poverty school. And a school where greater than 70% of its students are identified as economically disadvantaged, that's a high poverty school. And so you can see how I did that in the other video. And so I've created this variable called high poverty. So let's say I want to visualize this variable about SAT participation to see if it's different. So one way to do that is by just looking at the distribution of this variable SAT participation for both groups. So one way to do that is using the two-way command. And what's nice about the two-way command is it lets you layer graphics over top of one another. And so what I want to look at again, so our outcome variable is SAT participation. And so that's going to be up here. So this is obviously going to only include high schools. And so what we want to do is use a conditional statement to say, show me the distribution of SAT participation, but only in our low poverty schools. And then what we're asking Stata to do is also show me the distribution of SAT participation, but only in our high poverty schools. And so this will just show you the shape of that distribution. Sometimes this can be helpful, sometimes it's not. This depends on your research question, the data that you're working with. So you can see here there appears to be a difference, but there's a left tail on both of these. So another way that you might want to do this is by using the CI plot command, and which does some really nice stuff for us. The one thing to keep in mind, though, is that the CI plot command is not built into Stata. So what you'll have to do is just install it, which is really simple. So to install the CI plot command, you just type ssc install CI plot. You hit enter. And then what that does is it tells Stata to go online and look up in the repository of commands for this command called CIplot and install it. In my case, I already have it installed, so it didn't do anything. And so that means that once you install this command, you don't have to reinstall it. You just have to do this once, but make sure that CIplot is on your computer or you won't be able to generate these graphs. So what you can do now with this CIplot command is we can show the mean and confidence interval for this variable SAT participation for each of our two groups, high and low poverty schools. And the way to do that is just by typing CIplot, and then we want our outcome variable or dependent variable SAT participation, and then we just use this by option. And high poverty is our grouping variable. And again, you can only have two groups with a t-test. So then I hit enter. And so what it does is it shows the mean and 95% confidence interval for both of our groups. And so recall that 0, so these are low poverty schools. So their average SAT participation is 77-ish%. And then over here, the average SAT participation rate in high poverty schools is actually right at 85%. And then by looking at the confidence intervals, you can see that they don't overlap. And so that tells you that that there is a statistically significant difference between them. For more more specific or more precise information on this difference, you would run the Ttest command and get your results there. But this is one way to show the difference, the mean difference between two groups, which is what you're looking at with an independent samples t-test. And so that's all there is to it. And then you can use the graph editor to modify this graph. Like, you could label this as low poverty and this is high poverty, give it titles and things like that, which could be good to dress it up. But this is how you at least visualize the data.